It takes still longer to get back, and the day after we begin all over again." And the worthy man quietly folded his hands on the fair roundness of his figure. He looked a good sort of fellow. He did his job conscientiously, put his men into the third-class compartments assigned to them, saw that they had their cartridges, and gave them some fatherly counsel, and then he invited me into the second-class compartment reserved for him. But I declined, as I preferred to travel with my horses. The train jolted off. The heat was tropical. We had pushed our sliding door wide open, and, seated on our packages, we contemplated the smiling summer landscape as it passed slowly before us. And I came to the conclusion that we had found out the pleasantest of ways of travelling: to have a railway carriage to yourself, where you can stand up, walk about and lie down, to go at a pace that allows you to enjoy the scenery of the counties you pass through, and to be able to linger and admire such and such a view, such and such a country, mansion or monument of olden days. That is 100 times better than the shaking and rush of a train de luxe. I was delighted and touched by the sympathetic interest shown in us by the people. Everywhere old men, women, children waved their handkerchiefs and called out, "Good luck! Good luck!" The worthy Territorials answered back as best they could. One felt that all their hearts were possessed with one and the same thought, wish and hope, the hearts of the men who were going slowly up to the battle, and those of the people who watched them pass and sent their good wishes with them. At one station where we stopped, a group of girls dressed in white were waiting on the platform under the burning rays of the sun. With simplicity, grace and charming smiles they distributed chocolate, bread and fruit to all of the men. The good fellows were so touched that tears came to their eyes. One of them, an elderly man with a grey, pointed beard, could not help saying, "But we aren't going to fight, you know. We're only here to take care of the train." "That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Take it all the same. You are soldiers like the others. Vive la France!" And all the 30 Territorials, in deep and solemn tones, repeated, "Vive la France!" What a change had come over these men who, people feared, were ripe for revolt, undisciplined and reckless! What kindness and grace in the women who stay at home and suffer! An old railway man said to me, "It has been like that, sir, from the first day of the mobilisation. These girls pass their days and nights at the station. It is really very good of them, for they won't make anything by it." The old man was right. They won't make anything by it. And yet I am sure that many soldiers who have passed that station on their way to the front will keep the same grateful remembrance that I still have. I shall never forget the group of girls in white on the sunny platform of that little station. I shall never forget the simple grace with which they prevailed upon the men to accept the good things they offered and even forced upon them. I thanked them as best I could, but awkwardly enough, trying to interpret the thoughts of all those soldiers. And when the train had started again on its panting course, I felt sorry I had not been more eloquent in my speech, that I had already forgotten the name of the little station, and never thought of asking the names of our benefactresses. We were now getting near the fighting zone, and I already felt that there was a change in the state of the mind of the people. They still called out to us, "Good luck! Good luck!" But earlier in the day this greeting had been given with smiles and merry gestures. Now it was uttered in a serious and solemn tone. At the station gates and the level crossings the eyes of the women who looked at us were more sad and profound. They fixed themselves upon ours and seemed to speak to us. Even when their lips did not move, their eyes still said, "Good luck! Good luck!" We saw motor cars rushing along the roads, and could distinguish the armbands on the men's sleeves, and rifles in the cars or lying in the hoods. And yet daily life was going on as usual. There were workers in the fields, tradespeople on the doorsteps of their shops, groups of peasants just outside the hamlets. But yet a peculiar state of mind was evident in each one of these people who were going on with their daily work. And all these accumulated cares, all these stirred imaginations, produced a strange atmosphere which infected everything, seemed to impregnate the air we breathed, and quenched the gaiety of the men in our train. Wattrelot and I were overcome by a kind of religious emotion. We felt as though we were already breathing the air of battle. At about 6 o'clock we arrived at the station of L., where the train stopped for a few minutes. The platforms were crowded with staff officers. A soldier assured me that the chief headquarters was here. I wanted to question someone and try to get some authoritative information as to what was happening at the front. It seemed to me that I had a right to know, now that I was at the point of becoming one of the actors in the tragedy in progress a few leagues off. But directly I came up to these officers I felt my assurance fail me. They looked disturbed and anxious. There was none of that merry animation that had reigned in the interior and that I had expected to find everywhere. And then a strange and ridiculous fear came over me, the fear of being looked upon as an intruder by these well-informed men who knew everything. I imagined that they would spurn me with scorn, or that I should cause them pain by forcing them to tell me truths people do not like to repeat. It also occurred to me that I was too insignificant a person to confront men in so high an office, and that I should appear importunate if I disturbed their reflections. But I was now quite sure that the official announcements had not told us all. Without having heard one word, I felt that things were not going so well as we had hoped, as every day in our little town in the west we tried passionately to divine the truth, devouring the few newspapers that reached us. A pang shot through me. I now felt alone and lost amongst these men who seemed strangers to me. Crossing the rails, I got back to our train, drawn up at some distance from the platforms. The sun was on the horizon. In the red sky 2 monoplanes passed over our heads at no great height. The noise of their engines made everybody look up. They were flying north, and I felt a desire to rush upwards and overtake one of them and take my seat close to the pilot, behind the propeller, which was spinning round and sending the wind of its giddy speed into his face. I longed to be able to lift myself into the air above the battlefields, and there, suspended in space, try to make out the movements of the clashing nations. I resolved to have a talk with the engine driver of a train returning to Paris empty. He told me in a few words that the French army was retiring rapidly, that it had already recrossed the Belgian frontier, and that at the moment it was fighting on French soil. He told me this simply and with a touch of sadness in his voice, shaking his head gently. He added no comments of his own, and I did not feel equal to any reply. Full of foreboding, I returned to my train and Wattrelot. He had heard what the engine driver had told me, and he said not a word, but looked out into the distance at the fiery sky. We sat down side by side and said nothing. So we were retreating. Then all our calculations and dreams were shattered. All the fine plans we officers had sketched out together were folly. We were wasting time when, bending over our maps, we foresaw a skilful advance on the heels of Belgium's invaders, followed by a huge victory, dearly bought perhaps, but one that would upset the German colossus at a single blow. The whole thing was an illusion. And I thought what a fool I had been. I thought of my regiment. How much of it was there left? How many of those good fellows were lying dead on foreign soil? How many friends should I never see again? For I imagined things to be worse than they really were. I felt absolutely despondent. What my mind conjured up was no longer a retreat in good order, but a rout. The train had begun to move again. The sun had set, and over the horizon there was but a streak of pale yellow sky lighting up the country. I sat down in the open doorway with my legs dangling outside, and as I breathed the first few whiffs of fresh air I felt somewhat relieved. The calm around was such as to make one forget that we were at war. Darkness came on by degrees. Suddenly my heart began to beat faster, and I rose with a nervous movement. Wattrelot, too, had started up from the straw he had been lying on. We both exclaimed in one breath: "Cannon!" It was a mere distant growl, hardly audible, and yet it was distinct enough to be subdued accompaniment to the thousand noises a train makes as it goes along. We could not distinguish the shots,